Oh, all right.
Welcome to Wormania! Learn everything you ever wanted to know about worms. Featuring Mary Applehof as Worm Woman. With Billy B and the Brennan Kids.
Have you ever seen a leaf disappear into the ground? It was probably a worm, yes, pulling that leaf down.
Dad, what are you watching?
I'm watching a worm drag a leaf across the ground.
Why are you watching a worm drag a leaf across the ground?
Because it's fascinating. So I thought I'd just have to write a song about it.
Fascinating?
Yeah.
That's right. I couldn't agree with you more, Billy B.
Who said that?
I did. I'm Mary Applehof, the worm woman from Kalamazoo, and I speak for the worms.
Dad, she just talked to us. How did she do that?
Call it magical, call it techno-mystery.
Let's call it following the script, Dad.
Ah, number one son speaks the truth.
Anyway, Dad, I need a ride over to Jessica's. And since James failed his driving test...
Well, excuse me.
That leaves you, Dad. Can I get a ride?
Sure, as soon as I get done writing the song.
How long is that gonna take?
About a half hour, or maybe shorter if you both help me.
That's what you get when you have a songwriter for a father.
Have you ever seen a leaf that disappear into the ground? Was probably a worm, yes, pulling that leaf down.
What's the worm gonna do with that leaf?
It's going to eat it.
Yeah, so when a worm needs something to munch, it drags a leaf down into its hole for lunch. Yeah.
Ooh, I like it. So what are we talking about?
Yes,
We're talking about worms.
What are you singing about?
We're singing about worms.
What's the big deal about worms?
Tell him, worm woman.
Hi, Julian. We're talking about worms because they're so valuable to the entire natural world, and that includes people.
Prove it to him, worm woman.
Okay, meet me out in the yard.
Where did she go?
Well, you heard her. She said to meet her outside.
Yeah, you expect me to believe that?
Let's go and find out. Come on. Let's go, Jules.
She is here! She has a really weird outfit on.
She looks like some sort of patrol guard.
That's not too far off, James. You might say I'm on worm patrol. I go where the worms go. That's where it's wet and dirty.
Well, it's nice to meet you in person, worm woman. So, where are the worms?
We'll just follow the worm sign.
What's the worm
that?
sign?
Yeah, what's worm sign?
Well, come on over here and follow me. When you look closely, you'll find these little irregular piles of worm manure. This is a worm sign, or what we scientists call castings. Some worms cast their manure on the surface after eating.
You mean they poop?
You got it. Worms are detritivores. That means they eat dead stuff and make plant food out of it.
Oh, I have a backdrop where I can show you how that works. Come on. Now, here's my backdrop. It's a forest. Of course, the forest is made of trees, and trees are plants. And plants pull nutrients out of the ground up into their leaves. The leaves use the nutrients with the energy from the sun to make food for the plant. Then the leaves die and drift back to the ground. That's when the bacteria starts to decompose those leaves, and that's when the worms do their job. The worms turn those rotting leaves back into nutrient-rich soil.
It sounds as if worms are nature's best recyclers.
Right!
Yeah.
Hey, look over there. I'll bet we'll find worms under that bag of leaves.
Let's see.
Look, there's a worm.
Hey, how'd you know there'd be a worm under here, worm woman?
Because worms love dark, moist places.
Look at that worm go.
That's because it's trying to get away from the light. And that's why I always use my red light when I look for night crawlers at night. Worms aren't as bothered by red light.
So what are we talking about?
We're talking about worms.
So when that worm gets done with that leaf, Like all animals, it poops for relief.
It goes in as dead matter like leaves and comes out as fertile soil.
So talking about worm poop might sound rude, but worm poop is important plant food. So what are we talking about?
We're talking about worms.
Poop!
Yeah, what are we talking about?
We're talking about worms.
Poop!
So worms are valuable because they poop a lot?
That's just one of the reasons they're valuable. Worms also aerate the soil when they move through the ground. That loosens the soil, helping the roots of all the plants breathe. If it weren't for worms, we'd have compaction.
What's so bad about compaction?
Well, come on over here and I'll show you. When it rains hard on compacted soil, the water stays on top. When the water flows downhill, the runoff carries soil with it, creating erosion. Julian, will you please pick up that pipe? Worm burrows, like this pipe, direct water to the plant's roots where they can absorb it.
So worms are valuable because they're both poopers and plumbers?
Well, there's one more thing the worms do for the soil. This is a worm observation chamber that I built in Kalamazoo. Scientists like me use these to study the impact of worms on the soil. First, I added 1 inch of rocks, which is known as parent material. Then I added 4 inches of subsoil that I gathered at a construction site where they had been digging. Next, I put in 4 inches of topsoil. And I topped it off with 3 inches of compost and leaves. This is known as the organic layer that mimics the leaf litter in the forest. If I had left this chamber alone for a year, it would look the same. But I added worms and things began to change. Look what happened in only 2 months. You can see how the worms are burrowing into the subsoil. After 11 months, the top 2 layers have been completely mixed and the subsoil has even more worm activity.
Wow, the worms have really been busy.
Is it important for the soil to be mixed up?
Oh, I know the answer to that one. Just like us humans need a variety of nutrients to stay healthy, so do the plants. The difference is plants get their nutrients from the ground, not the grocery store.
I remember now, nutrients come from the dead material in the organic layer, but minerals come from the rocks and subsoil. When the worms mix all the soil together, all those nutrients can get to the plant's roots to help them grow.
Right.
Yeah, but won't the worms rip their skin when they move through that gritty soil?
Well, they line their burrows with mucus.
Oh, cool! Slime!
Worms secrete mucus as they move through their burrows to reduce friction and wear and tear on their bodies. Can you see how shiny it is right here?
This is getting grosser and grosser.
So like a dump truck moving dirt.
And a plumber laying pipe.
The worm digs its hole.
Mixing soils of all types.
Because it poops.
Digs holes and keeps the ground loose.
Nutrients, air, and water reach the roots.
So what are we talking about?
We're talking about worms.
So what are we singing about?
We're singing about worms.
Oh, that was great. Now guess what? I have a surprise for you. I'll meet you in the kitchen.
What's she gonna do? Cook us some worms?
Ooh, I just got a great idea for a song. I'll meet you in the kitchen in a bit. See you later.
Okay.
Uh-oh, looks like leftovers for dinner again.
No, these aren't for you. This is for the worms. I found it in your garbage can.
Oh, gross. That's disgusting.
Well, it is disgusting. You're throwing all these resources away that will end up in the landfill.
But what if we put them on the garbage disposal?
Well, that's just as bad. Then it'll be processed at the wastewater treatment plant, and that takes water and energy. What a waste when these things could be made into good, rich soil instead. Look at these things you're throwing away. Apple cores, banana peels, rinds, eggshells.
I bet the worms will even eat eggshells if you crush them.
All right, Julian. Here, let's measure how much waste we're throwing away just from breakfast and lunch. Go put this on the scale.
Whoa! A whole pound. That's almost half a kilogram.
Let's see.
If that's 1 pound for breakfast and lunch, plus 1 more pound for dinner, times 7 days a week, times 52 weeks a year,
That's
Turns out to be
728 pounds a year.
728.
That's almost 330 kilograms.
Oh.
That's a lot of waste. I mean, especially when you think about how many people there are in this country doing exactly the same thing. So how can we deal with it?
Haven't you been listening to Worm Woman? The worms will eat it. All we gotta do is throw it in the backyard.
Julian, we can't do that. You'll attract every animal in the neighborhood.
Oh.
So where can we put it, Worm Woman?
I'll show you.
Whoa, what's this?
This is a worm bin. It's an aerated container. We'll create a habitat for worms using newspaper and soil and water. The worms will feel right at home.
You mean we're going to have worms living in our house?
You got it. Let's set one up. First, we'll take some paper and shred it. Oh, that'll make great bedding. The worms will eat it, you know. Okay, Julian, now you can sprinkle some garden soil on there.
Sure.
And James, you can add enough water to make it moist but not soggy.
All right.
Good job. That's plenty, I think. Now, Shannon, you can mix it up with this worm fork.
Okay. That was easy, but where are the worms?
Right here.
Cool. How many worms are you gonna put in there?
Oh, about 1,000. Oh, be careful, Julian. Don't mash it. It's fragile, you know.
So, what kind of worms are these?
Icenia fetida.
Icenia fetida?
That's a scientific name.
But you can call them redworms if you want. Here's a good example. The redworm on the melon rind has distinct stripes like a tiger. Redworms have a specialized job in the worm world, and that is to make compost. They have voracious appetites and love to eat rotting stuff.
You mean like this food waste?
Sure, toss it in.
So they'll actually eat our garbage?
Yes, that's right. And here's a look at what your worm bin will look like in about 6 months. Well, here I am. It's the first time I've ever been in a worm bin. Worms like to eat soft things like this melon. As you can see, the only thing left on it is the rind. But since they don't have teeth, they rely on bacteria to break down the food before they eat it. I like to say, worms eat my garbage. But it's probably more correct to say, worms eat the bacteria that eat my garbage.
And as they eat up our garbage, we can use their poop, castings, as fertilizer in our garden. And it won't attract animals.
Exactly. See how the organic material has turned this into rich soil?
Yeah, quite a difference.
What's that little yellow thing?
That's a cocoon.
So what is a cocoon anyway?
Cocoons are where baby worms come from.
So, how are they made?
Adult worms produce them when they breed.
They breed?
Make babies?
Oh, so we have both male and female worms in this bin?
Well, in fact, each worm has both sexual parts.
They're both? At the same time?
They're hermaphrodites.
Ooh, big word.
Hey, I pay attention in biology class.
Oh, so a hermaphrodite means the worm is both a boy and a girl?
Yes, in this case, it means that each worm produces both eggs and sperm.
Hey, Julian, hit me with some slow jams. Oh, darling, I love you. Want to go on a double date? Your bro or mine?
Pretty funny, James. Actually, night crawlers do visit each other's burrows before mating.
So, how do they mate?
Let me show you. When worms mate, they move together and overlap, head to head. That swollen band, called a clitellum, secretes slime which holds both worms together.
Slime is so sublime.
Okay. Now, as the worms are joined by the mucus, they exchange sperm, which are stored in a tiny sac in their bodies.
When do they make the cocoon?
After the worms separate. Later, the clitellum again secretes mucus that eventually hardens to form the shell of the cocoon.
Like my clay ring?
Right. Your finger represents the worm, and this ring represents the cocoon. As the cocoon slides down the body, it passes over the ovaries and sperm sacs where it picks up eggs and the sperm needed for fertilization. The cocoon then slips off the end of the worm, closing off on both ends.
Like this?
Exactly. And the sperm fertilize the egg inside the cocoon. Let's take a look at the real thing. These are actual cocoons, about as big as a grain of rice. See how translucent they are?
Does that mean you can see through them?
No, that means the light can pass through them.
Right again.
Worms, making worms. It's mating time. I said worms, exchanging sperm, locked together with slime. P. Clyde, tell 'em that's mucus flow. The mucus hardens, then the cocoon grows. Like a ring, it moves off the worm, gathering the eggs and the sperm. Oh, worms, making worms. It's mating time. I said worms, exchanging sperm, locked together with slime. The cocoon slips off the front of the worm, filled with fluid, eggs and sperm. Then the eggs are fertilized, and the cocoon has little worms inside. Oh, worms, making worms. It's mating time. I said worms, exchanging sperm, locked together with slime. I said worms, making worms. It's mating time. I said worms, exchanging sperm, locked together with slime.
Now here's a cocoon after several weeks. Can you see the baby worms moving inside? Look at those segments.
Looks like some kind of alien.
Just the opposite, actually, given the fact that a worm spends its entire life in the ground. If ever there was a true earth creature, this is it.
Those moving bands are segments?
Yes, sirree, Bob. Now look at this one. See the beating blood vessels? And now for the big moment. After a few weeks, the cocoon will hatch. Aw, now isn't that cute?
I don't know, Worm Woman. Calling them cute is kind of a stretch to me.
Well, I guess they've just wormed their way into my heart.
Oh, gosh.
Hey, that's why I'm the Worm Woman. Now let's take a look at how the worm uses hydraulics to move. James, will you please fill this balloon with water?
Gladly.
Like humans, a worm's body is made of water and muscles.
Like this?
I only see bones, Julian. Where's the muscle?
This is muscle, Shannon. Not big and bulky like a weightlifter's, but it's definitely muscle.
You see, Julian's muscles are attached to his bones. A worm has no bones, but it does have two kinds of muscles. Circular muscles, which go around the worm, and longitudinal muscles, which extend the length of the worm. This balloon represents two segments of a worm's body. In my hands are the worm's circular muscles. Just like this balloon, the worm's body is filled with water. Contracting the circular muscles squeezes the water into the next segment, forcing it to extend. The pressure created by contracting the circular muscles is called hydraulic pressure. Now let's take a look at a real worm using hydraulics.
Hydraulics?
Well, hydraulics is liquid moving under pressure.
Now let's see how a worm's longitudinal muscle works. A muscle works by contracting or getting shorter. In between contractions, it relaxes, getting longer. With the rubber worm, let's pretend that all the circular muscles are contracting, forcing the longitudinal muscles to relax. See how the head moves forward? Now, if the longitudinal muscles contract, what happens to the tail end of the worm?
The tail end moves forward.
Right. Now let's look at the real thing.
So let me see if I've got it. The worm alternately contracts the circular muscles and the longitudinal muscles, causing the front end to bulge forward.
That's right. You're really catching on.
So what holds the front end of the worm to the surface? I mean, they don't have fingers to help them.
They don't have fingers, but they do have little bristles that act like hooks, sort of like Velcro. These bristles hold one end of the worm down while the other end moves. Let's take a look at some of the different kinds of bristles, called setae, that help worms move. Most of the worms in the northern United States and Canada have 4 pairs of setae on each segment, like this one. Look at the difference in the setae on this worm.
There's a million setae, and they're all the way around the worm.
That's true. Worms from Asia often have this setae pattern, and we also find them in warmer climates in the United States. Now take a look at this one.
Cool. A worm with its own fish hooks.
I like to call this one bristlebutt, and it's found in tropical countries deep within the soil.
Yeah, it looks like the ultimate all-terrain worm.
But no matter what they look like, CT act like little breaks against the surface, holding that part of the body down while another part moves.
Who's that moving through the darkness under cover of the night? Segment squeezing, CT breaking. It's the worm avoiding light. Relax and contract and extend the front end. Squeeze and release those bristle breaks, please. CT traction, hydraulic action. It's the squirming worm physiology. Ooh.
I also think that CT may have another purpose, although it's never been fully proven. Doesn't it look as if the CT are collecting food as the worm moves? This worm certainly seems to be using its CT like a lint brush to gather up all sorts of plant matter.
Who's that moving through the darkness under cover of the night? Segment squeezing, CT breaking. It's the worm avoiding light.
This worm sees you and it's ready to bite.
Cool it, Julian.
Actually, Julian, a worm has no eyes and it doesn't have teeth, but it does have a mouth.
Well, how can they find their food if they can't see?
By sense of touch.
Oh, so kind of like when Shannon's reaching around the upper pantry for chocolate she's not supposed to eat?
I'm gonna kill you.
You're right on the money, Julian. Let's take a look. Here's the worm gathering food using its sense of touch. This worm is even making a hook out of its body to grab that piece of grass and pull it towards its burrow. After the grass begins to rot, the worm will eat the bacteria. Did you ever see how wide a worm can open its mouth? In the digestive tract, various organs process the food. First, it's stored in the crop, then it passes to the gizzard.
I thought only chickens have gizzards.
They do, but worms have gizzards too, and that's what grinds up the food. Then it's on to the intestines, where enzymes and bacteria break it down further so the worm can get its nutrients. The stuff the worm can't use passes through the intestines and out the anus.
Worm anatomy, like a tube inside a tube. Worm anatomy, yes, a worm has many parts. Worm anatomy, there are nerves and muscles too. Worm anatomy, 5 pairs of beating hearts. Beating hearts, pumping blood with oxygen. Beating hearts, then the blood returns again. Beating hearts, 5 pair and double file. Beating hearts, symmetrical worm style. Worm anatomy, like a tube inside a tube. Worm anatomy, yes, a worm has many parts. Worm anatomy, digestive tract for food. Worm anatomy, the mouth is where it starts. Digestive parts, the crop stores the gizzard grind. Digestive parts, intestines go to the behind. Pooped up parts, when the anus lets it out, it all starts at the toothless mouth. Worm anatomy, like a tube inside a tube. Worm anatomy, yes, the worm has many parts. Worm anatomy, there are nerves and muscles too. Worm anatomy, and 5 pairs of beating hearts. Beating hearts.
So I bet if the worm sees something and wants to eat, it opens up its mouth and snaps at it. Ow. Worm bite!
Bum, 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 bum. Jules, what happened?
He just learned a lesson in hydraulics.
Oh, James.
James, just wait until you go to sleep tonight. You're gonna wake up without a million worms in your bed.
No, go dry off, Jules. Go ahead.
Listen, Dad, I really do have to go to Jessica's. We have to leave now.
I just kept on doing the worm song. You guys want to hear it?
Gee, I'd love to, Billy B, but I've got to go find the world's longest worm. Bye now. Have fun with your new worm,
See you
Ben.
later. Thanks a lot.
Bye, thanks. Dad, we have to go right now. You promised.
But Jake, how about...
I just remembered. I've got something important to do.
Yeah, I don't get no respect around here.
Come on, Dad.
Have you ever seen a leaf disappear into the ground? It was probably a worm, yes, pulling that leaf down.
So when a worm needs something to munch, it drags a leaf down into its hole for lunch.
So what are we talking about?
We're talking about worms.
So when that worm gets done with that leaf, like all animals, it poops for relief. So talking about worm poop might sound rude, but worm poop is important plant food.
Because it poops.
Digs holes and keeps the ground loose.
Nutrients, air, and water reach the roots.
So what are we talking about?
Worms.
We're talking about worms.
So what are we singing about?
We're singing about worms.
Ooh, I like it.